Welcome to the Unlocking Your Mental Gridlock podcast by the Lab of Thought. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, and today I'm joined by Marcus Torres, a city transport planner here in Seattle. We're diving into a fascinating research paper that's really challenging how we think about urban experimentation, particularly in transport.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. Yeah, this paper by Mukhtar Landgren and colleagues really caught my attention because it uses this incredible metaphor that completely reframes how we should think about urban living labs.
Right, the doors versus cracks metaphor from Bayo Akamalafe. Can you break that down for our listeners?
Absolutely. So, Akomolafe describes doors as anticipated architectural technologies. They allow movement, sure, but only within the logic of the existing structure. A building doesn't lose its integrity with doors. They're predictable. They behave.
Exactly.
But cracks? Cracks are unruly, unpredictable. They open toward the unknown. And here's the thing. The authors argue that most urban living labs today are functioning as doors, not cracks.
That's such a powerful way to think about it. From my research perspective, I see this all the time. ULLs that are supposed to be these innovative, experimental spaces, but they're actually constrained by EU funding structures, short-term deliverables, buzzwords like co-creation and smart cities.
Right, and in transport specifically, we're dealing with such a technical domain. There are powerful industrial actors, path dependencies, and infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely.
Engineering standards, this whole narrative of efficiency and optimization. So even when we set up these experimental labs, we're often just shuffling within the already known. Electrification, automation, platformization, it's innovation, but within the same fundamental framework.
Exactly. And the paper has this great line about how the lab becomes a door that only opens within the architecture of the funding call. The institutional context of projectification narrows the horizon of experimentation. But then they give us this amazing historical example that shows what cracks can actually look like.
The Dutch cycling transformation. I love this example because it's so relevant to what we're trying to do in cities today. Tell me what happened there.
So, in the 1970s, Dutch cities weren't the bicycle paradises we see today. Actually, bicycle use was declining dramatically after World War II because of mass motorization. Many experts predicted bicycles would disappear from urban mobility entirely.
Right. So what changed?
Well, what's fascinating is that the transformation started with what we would call experiments today. Free bike sharing, pop-up bike lanes, play streets, street dinners. But here's the key. These weren't programmed from above. Most professionals and policymakers thought bicycles had no future.
So these were genuine cracks in the system.
Exactly. And they were propelled by intense political struggles. Mass demonstrations, surprise street occupations, political lobbying, citizen science initiatives. It all began in civil society and only later entered formal policy. It was messy, conflictual, unruly. The whole thing was fueled by broader struggles for the right to the city.
That's so different from how we approach these things now. We want everything neat, measurable, replicable, but what you're describing sounds chaotic.
Right, and that's exactly the point the authors are making. They argue we need to fundamentally reimagine the three components of urban living labs: the urban, the living, and the lab itself.
Okay, break that down for me. What does bringing the urban back in mean?
So often, ULLs treat the urban as just a neutral container for innovation. But cities are deeply political, contested spaces with uneven geographies of power and access. The authors ask, what if we don't think of ULLs as protected places of innovation, but as democratically legitimized, agonistic spaces of contested emergence?
That's uncomfortable for planners like me who like control and predictability. But I can see how shielding experiments from urban messiness might actually reproduce the inequalities we're trying to address.
Exactly. And then bringing the living back in means moving beyond treating people as just users or stakeholders. It means recognizing people as situated, sensing, political beings, and seeing cities as ecologies of care and conflict where human and more than human lives are entangled.
That's a big shift.
It means centering practices that are often overlooked: repair, maintenance, mutual aid, the quiet labor of keeping things going, and crucially, making space for refusal and unlearning, the right to say no to extractive practices, to technocratic planning, to the relentless pressure to innovate.
And what about bringing laboratories back in?
This is where they really challenge current funding structures. Instead of focusing on scalable, replicable results, they want to reclaim labs as spaces of curiosity and epistemic humility. They propose shifting from scalability to translatability, recognizing that nothing travels without changing.
That's really challenging for how we fund and evaluate projects. But I'm thinking about mobility specifically. We do see these organic experiments happening in cities all the time. Street vendors creating informal transit networks, communities organizing car-free events.
Yes, and that's exactly what they mean by developing foundational curiosity to ongoing non-programmed experiments that happen in cities daily. Instead of only focusing on what's sanctioned by EU programs, we should be looking at radical experiments happening in Latin American cities or fundamental shift that happened in the 1970s.
So, from a practical standpoint, what does this mean for someone like me working in city government? How do we actually create space for these cracks?
I think it starts with recognizing that transformation often begins outside formal channels. It means creating legitimate spaces for contestation and disagreement, not just consensus building. And it probably means being willing to support experiments that you can't fully control or predict the outcomes of.
That's terrifying and exciting at the same time. It means moving away from the lab as controlled testing toward the lab as encounter, where different worlds meet and clash and co-compose.
Exactly. And it invites us to see mobility not just as movement through space, but as relational, ethical, and political practice. The authors end by saying we need to be mindful of cracks rather than persistently trying to construct better doors.
It really makes me think differently about what we're trying to achieve with our mobility planning. Maybe instead of just focusing on efficiency and optimization, we need to create more space for the unexpected, the unplanned, the messy.
And that's the challenge this paper presents to all of us working in urban innovation. Are we building doors within existing structures, or are we paying attention to the cracks where real transformation might emerge? Thanks for this great conversation, Marcus.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll definitely be looking for more cracks in our transport system. And to our listeners, we'll put a link to the full paper in our show notes. Until next time.